Hey Malia, it's Daddy. Uh, Mommy told me that you were missing Daddy, so I stayed up late to read you a story. And I want you to know that I miss you and I love you. And I will see you soon. Don't worry. Daddy's gonna give you the E-ride. And we're gonna play and go places and spend time together. Daddy's sorry he had to be gone so long, but he had to, I had to go on a work trip, okay? So I'm going to read you a story, and I want you to know I love you, Mommy and Bryce, more than anything in the world, and you are my favorite people, and you steal my firstborn. Okay, so here we go. The name of the story is Little Red Riding Hood. Okay, let me pull it up. Okay, so once upon a time there was a sweet little girl who lived with her mother and father in a pretty little cottage at the edge of the village. And on the other side, at the other end of the woods, was another pretty cottage, and that's where her grandmother lived. And everybody loved this little girl, like everybody likes Malia. And her grandmother perhaps loved her most of all and gave her a lot of nice presents. So one day she gave her like a little red cloak, something that she wore around her head, and she always wore this hood, so people call her Little Red Riding Hood because she always wore a red hood. So one morning, Little Red Riding Hood's mother said, "Put on your things and go see your grandmother. She's not feeling too well, and take this basket along with you to her, okay? I have put some eggs in it, some butter, and some cake, and some candies." And it was a bright sunny morning. Red Riding Hood was so happy that she wanted to dance through the woods. All around her grew pretty wild flowers, which she loved so well, and she stopped to pick up a bunch for her grandmother. Little Red Riding Hood wandered from her path and was stopping to pick up a flower when from behind her a gruff voice said, "Good morning, Little Red Riding Hood." Little Red Riding Hood turned around and saw the big bad wolf. But Little Red Riding Hood was not afraid because she did not know what a wicked beast the wolf was. "What do you have in the basket, Little Red Riding Hood?" "Eggs, butter, and cake, Mr. Wolf." "What are you going to do with them, Little Red Riding Hood?" "I'm going to my grandmother, who is sick, Mr. Wolf." "Where does your grandmother live, Little Red Riding Hood?" Along that path, past the wild rose bushes, then through the gate at the end of the woods, Mr. Wolf." Then Mr. Wolf began. Okay, then Mr. Wolf again said, "Good morning," and set off. And Little Red Riding Hood again went in search of wild flowers. At last he reached the porch covered with flowers and knocked at the door of the cottage. "Who's there?" called grandmother. "Little Red Riding Hood," said the wicked wolf. "Press the latch, open the door, and walk in," said grandmother. The wolf pressed the latch and walked in where grandmother lay in the bed. He made one jump at her, but she jumped out of the bed and into the closet. Then the wolf put on the cap which had fell off of grandmother's head, and the wolf crept under the bedclothes. A short while later, Little Red Riding Hood knocked on the door and walked in, saying, "Good morning, grandmother. I have bought you eggs, butter, and cake, and there's a bunch of flowers I gathered in the woods." As she came nearer to the bed, she said, "What big eyes you have, grandmother." "All the better to hear you with my dear." Oh, correction. What big ears you have, grandmother, altogether to hear you with, my dear. But grandmother, what a big nose you have, altogether to smell you with, my dear. But grandmother, what a big mouth you have, all the better to eat you up with, my dear, he said as he sprang at Little Red Riding Hood. Just at that moment, Little Red Riding Hood's father was passing by the cottage, and he heard her scream. He rushed in with an axe and chased the big bad wolf away. Everybody was happy that Little Red Riding Hood had escaped the bad wolf. Then Little Red Riding Hood's father carried her home, and they lived happily ever after. And that's my story for you, Malia. I hope that you enjoyed Daddy's story. Again, Daddy loves you, and Daddy's thinking of you. Good night. Kisses for my missus.